You can never fall too high, so fast, so far that you can't get back when you're lost. Where you are, it's never too late. So bad, so much that you can't change who you are. Ooh, oh, yeah.
You guys are touring a lot now, all over the place. So with the people that you meet now, and just meeting obviously people from all different demographics, what do you think has changed as far as the generation today when it comes to church and sharing Christ with people versus maybe the way it was 20 years ago or when you guys were growing up, as far as what's the generational differences? What are some of the things that you've seen?
I identify a lot with this generation now because they're more willing to get involved in like social like issues and things like that. They're more doers. They want to be more doers. They want to somewhat make a difference.
They want to have a voice.
Yeah, they want to have a voice. So it's kind of like there was a point where you know, you go to church, you heard the gospel, you heard a good message, you went home and you know and held yourself to some good moral values and lived a good life. You know, be a good person and maybe strive to that. And I think that now it's like everybody's just really hungry to be able to make a difference. You know, it's like to make their lives count. And so a lot of them don't even know where to start, but the hunger is there because you see it when I open up my Facebook and everybody's talking about either this cause or this other thing or this injustice here or whatnot, whether they're believers or not. So I feel like people want to kind of make their lives count. They want to find a cause.
The majority of the people that walk through the doors of the church, you introduce them to Christ and their lives are changed in that moment. But we have people that walk through the doors across the U.S., you know, that have never been to church. This is their first time, and so it's kind of like, where do you start?
Yeah.
You know, where do you start? So I mean, I know that, you know, as I was reading through the foreword that you guys put together, you know, that was one of the things that you talked about, is just noticing that people have a lack of identity. So I mean, what do you think? Can you talk to me a little bit about that? I mean, I know that we live in this world where we're great at packaging. We're great at really packaging Jesus, as far as you know, we're great at the marketing side. Like I've said that maybe like 30 years ago, we were awesome at teaching, but we weren't that great at going. And now we're really, really great at going, but we're not necessarily awesome at teaching the basics. I think we kind of forget that people don't know that. So, I mean, you guys see.
I feel like in our songs being hopefully biblically based, you know, and really working hard on crafting songs that are true theology and not just words that rhyme or themes or whatever, but actually, you know, being theologically correct. We're seeing a lot of response as we are putting out these kind of songs that people are hungry for the truth, you know, obviously, and they appreciate the truth. At times it's offensive, but I still feel like there's that rawness and honesty. I really do think that as the family culture is declined in the last 30 years, I mean, I remember growing up, I got to watch 1.5 hour TV a week. It was Fresh Prince of Bel-Air on Monday nights. And the point is that now I turn on the TV and what's acceptable in this culture in this time is so much crazier than what was acceptable then. And I guess it's just a meter of the decline in family values. And so what's happening, I feel like what's happening, and it happens in my own life, when, you know, in my own walk with God, is the follow through. You know, it's my inability to follow through day to day, you know, and then it's the church's inability to follow through. And I realize that you know, we're just busy. We tend to keep our distance. Our culture is looking for people to invest in them, and I guess there's the follow through. There is that's discipleship, and I feel like, you know, even me growing up in the church, having a great home life and all of that, obviously getting into drug addiction and all, I didn't really understand about discipleship or the importance. And it's even been hard for us over the last 10 years as we've gotten saved. I mean, Mike and I basically got saved right around the same time and then got thrown right into full-time ministry, and we've been out ministering, and discipleship has kind of fallen by the wayside for us, and we've really had to be intentional about bringing that into our lives because we're out and trying to invest in everybody else. And so I see it in my own life, the importance of it, of follow through, you know, in my own personal walk, and then also the leadership that I'm under, following through, following up on me. and investing in me.
And I think that it has to be more than just making a really nice setting and investing in good lights and a good sound system and having the worship team be tight. Those are all great things. But at the end of the day, people are gonna come. They're gonna do that even if there's no meat, if there's not a solid foundation of teaching and how you can apply that to to your real life. A combination of things like basic principles. Teaching, follow-up, discipleship, the gifts of the Spirit, how does that apply for today? It's got to be a combination of those things. Was healing only for back in the day, or is God still forgiving sins and healing today? Or is it just one or the other? Like, people want to know, they want to experience God. They want to see a sermon. I feel like people just want to go to a place where somebody says, hey, listen, this is the gospel. It's good news. It is good news. But with this good news comes a lot of, it's not an easy walk, we'll hold you by the hand and we'll walk this thing together type of deal, but not just like making it super fancy and super great worship and whatnot, and people just being there and just people just giving enough of their comfortness and not being willing to cross the threshold of being all right, I'm gonna give it all I have. That's where they're gonna find their identity, who they really are, who God has really made us. So if you don't know where you are, you're just going to be walking. It's like a man forgetting his history, a man forgetting where he came from, and then one day realizing that he's wandered so far out, and then you have to then backtrace and try to find out who you are, so it's super important, and in your book you have so many facts and things that are just mind-blowing facts about things that that God has created, that is just right there in plain sight. But if nobody comes and says, hey, have you noticed this? Have you noticed that? Have you noticed the stars? Have you noticed this thing? And all this facts that make you oh wow, it's all been designed, and there is a purpose, and then bringing it back to not just a purpose, there's a design for the whole world, but God has a plan designed for us individually. And so I think, that's super important, if not the most important thing, is to know where you stand, to build that foundation, to build that house in a solid foundation, and not just in the sand. Just go in and somebody gives you a sermon that makes you feel good, it tells you what you want to hear, you go home and you might apply that to your life, but that's not going to carry you too far, because in this Christian walk there are hard times, and if you're not grounded, when those huge waves come, it's all going to come crumbling down, and you just start questioning your faith and everything. Why did God do this? Why did God allow that? And why do good people die? And cancer and all that stuff. And it's if you don't understand God's sovereignty and all those things, or nobody has explained it to you, then you're just gonna be going with any wind of doctrine that comes.
I think for me, growing up, now as I'm 10 years sober, 10 years walking with God, I'm seeing that the intentionality is equally important from both sides. We need the church to be intentional and equipped to be able to disciple and be able to build these blocks, be able to teach. But we also need the converts, the believers, to be intentional about coming and being willing to be taught. And I'm seeing in my life completely, all the time, without intentionality, I'll always be status quo. I'm never going to reach my potential unless I'm intentional about spending time with my family, spending time in prayer, spending time reading the Bible and seeking God. If I'm not intentional about evangelizing and reaching out to my neighbor, literally my neighbors that are around me, and it's just interesting too that, in this culture we were talking about being flashy, and how what we do is all about creating an atmosphere for someone to come, and we call it evangelism. We call it that, and I think as we've kind of talked about what we do, evangelism is relationships. And so the more the church builds relationships with new believers, old believers, whoever, the more opportunities we have for discipleship and building, that core foundation like you're talking about.
So tell me one day, listen, evangelism is not an event.
Right.
It's not like an evangelistic event. And then what we do, we go to a place, we create an opportunity for people to come and hear the gospel sometimes for the first time. And then we partner with the local church that's there and say, hey, if you don't have anywhere to go here, nobody's going to judge you, you can come here. But it's the responsibility of the local church, because obviously we're here today, we're gone tomorrow. We cannot stay here in this. I mean, we do keep in touch. We have friends and everywhere we go, but that is our part that we feel like the Lord has given us in the body, is to just come and like expose Jesus, inspire and encourage and get people all fired up.
Yeah.
But it does take both sides, the church and the believer.
Yep.
You know, you can bring, that's that old saying about bringing the horse to the water, camel, cow, what is it? I know it's different in the Dominican. It's like the goat.
Make the iguana to come.
But you can't make it drink, you know? It's like, it's got to be both sides, and intentionality is what our culture probably lacks, church and individual believer.
Yeah, I found that people just seem to be intimidated over the years, having someone who has never walked, through the doors of a church. They come for the first time, they hear the gospel message, and you can see it, man. They're so hungry, they accept Christ, but then all of a sudden there's this intimidation factor where they realize, okay, well, I'm a Christian now, but I don't know anything about God's word, nothing. I don't know what my next step is. Then 2-3 months come along, and if no one has really begun to establish creation, identity, if no one has established who the Holy Spirit is and what the role is inside the believer and how to navigate seasons of life and those kind of things, next thing you know, they bonk because they don't have anything to stand on. All they know is they've got Jesus, but they don't know anything about his word. And I know that we try to put Bibles in the hands of people, but without even Jesus walked his disciples through the word. He taught them, obviously, him being the active word. So that was my heart as I saw people coming through the doors. They get saved, and then it's like, okay, but now there's 7 days before they come back. And a lot can happen in those first 6-7 days, as a believer. But so someone accepts Christ, let's get them immediately. Let's get something in their hands so they can start growing and start laying down blocks right away.
We come to church, and our culture wants to give so little. Because we're so self-centered, we all are. I mean, this isn't not accusing anyone. I'm just saying we all are so self-centered about our families and all of these things. Which some of these things are really good, but all we want to give is Sundays. Yep. And so the problem really is what do we do in those midweeks? What do we do between the time we go to church? And I think, the church culture here in America is doing a better job at building the small groups, because really that is church. Church is getting together and sharing meals together and sharing life together, and we don't really get that Sunday morning alone.
Yeah, even in communion, we have, and I know if I was a pastor, I'd probably do it like that, so I'm not going to judge, but we have reduced the communion from like sitting on a table, breaking bread, and just like celebrating Christ to like passing some fake bread and a little cup of juice, and it's just like, and I know it's convenient and it's all that, but like communion, in the way that I see it, it's just like sitting with people on a table and just like really, because it's so intimacy happens in a meal. Yeah. Like we're gonna go to lunch now, hopefully soon. Right. And you share. It's
again, a lot of it's just a lack of knowledge. People don't know that Christianity can be so much more than that, or they don't know about fellowship. They don't know about the active word per se. You can't disciple unless you've been discipled. Right. It's just the way it is. So it's got to start somewhere.
I was just going to say too that it really is the job of the core members of the church to not only get materials, like the blueprint, the Bible, hopefully those two team together, and there's other materials too, but then to walk them through it, you know what I mean? And again, that's part of that intentionality from the church, from the leadership, from the core members to take their time, and it's precious, and be intentional about taking people under their wing, you know what I mean? And so it's even more than just giving them the right materials, you know what I mean? I mean, it's walking through that. And so that's where I feel like our church culture really needs to, that's where I need to grow up and do more of, you know what I mean, personally in my own walk, coming alongside of people and all of that. So, I mean, there's just so many aspects of it, I don't think there's one, several things have to fall into place. But certainly, it does seem like it's a great place to start for sure.
This is Mike and Chad from Unspoken.
And we are the Unmoved Movement.